Greetings. Welcome to Dr. English's Book Lovers Book Club. I'm Dr. English and I teach English. Today, we're going to discuss My Friend Dahmer, and it's by Derf Backderf. And I just want to say that this is I only have about 8 left of the books that my young adult literature class read last fall. We did 38 books. And students had to read 3 books in common. We did as a whole class, and then they had to do another 3 books for small group work. And then every student, I think they did it in pairs, where they did a book talk. So there were 38 altogether, and this was one of the choices, My Friend Dahmer. And I have to say that another group did this in my graphic novel, teaching the graphic novel class last summer. And they actually built a model, like a model of Jeffrey Dahmer's house, which I thought was so interesting. But this book, I read it last night. Like, it took me like a couple hours. And I'm a huge fan of graphic novels. And this one is incredibly well done by Derf Backderf. And I don't know how many of you know the story of Jeffrey Dahmer. And I knew vague, kinds of things about it. But this book is actually, Derf Backderf was a friend of his in high school. And I wouldn't say they were friendly, but he was an acquaintance. And so this is told about him when he was like, he talks about him when they were younger, and then in middle school. They met in middle school in Ohio. And then it's more focused on what he was like in high school. And I found it just fascinating. And one of the things that I really liked about this is that Derf Backderf really wants to, ask the question, where were the adults? Like, because even he as a teenager, and teenagers, they don't really pay that much attention to what other people are doing, because they're teenagers, like, that's your thing, that's your thing. But he and his friends saw some alarming things about Jeffrey Dahmer. And also, he really describes Jeffrey Dahmer's family situation, which was horrendous. And so I do think there were some warning signs, some things that adults in the room, so to speak, should have probably recognized and sought some help. But I think about it being the 70s, and I just think that no one had any idea about the implications of some of his behaviors, because some of the behaviors he's done, other people have done, and they haven't made the kinds of choices that he made that were just, it's just too horrific to even say them out loud. It's so horrifying. And like I said, I knew vaguely about it, what he had done. But then I went and checked it on Wikipedia, and I looked it up, and it was like so gruesome. I had to stop reading it because I couldn't believe it was as gruesome as it was. And but I feel like that the whole point of this book is it doesn't go into any details about any of that, but it does go into some of the relationships he had. And at the end, it's the one thing I really liked about this is that he has, tons of notes about the kinds of research he did, because, he had an earlier version that was like 20 pages. And, that caught the attention of a lot of people. But he decided he was going to do in this other version, and he did a lot of research for this version, and personal interviews to people that knew him, and tried to reach out to the Dahmer's parents and found out stuff about his parents. So that part, I feel like bravo to you, Derf Backderf, for doing the work, and then also for putting the notes at the end. I really like that. He's got the sources, and he's got the notes, and so he's got all these end notes that talks a little bit about his process of, he really wanted to do justice to the story of, he felt like the first version didn't really do enough, didn't tell enough. It was just basically his own memoir of his own memories of Dahmer. And this one is much more complex and layered about, through research and his own personal experience that he mixed together. And so I'm going to read a section of this about, and he's such a great artist too. And this, I think I did not know either, is that Jeffrey Dahmer and I graduated in the same year. And I just think, oh my word, You know, it's just, I can't imagine, like, if one of my, you know, peers at that same time had done something like this, I think I probably would have said something because I'm a talker. I found that someone was acting that strange, I would have said something. So this is this is the section, the first couple pages of the Dahmer fan club. They actually did have a Dahmer fan club of a bunch of boys. They were like band nerds. They said they were band nerds and, you know, kids that were really bright. So here's the first part, and I will kind of show it. Here's, they're in the gym and they're getting ready to take photos. They're on the yearbook staff and they're getting ready to take, you know, like group photos, like club photos. So those are the pictures. Okay, Mr. Welker, I'm ready. And this is the photographer in the gym. October 1977, our senior year. Okay, let's listen up, everyone. Student council, quiet, please. Look, we get one chance at the yearbook photo. So if you clown around or look goofy or make a face, then that's how you'll look in perpetuity. And the Dahmer fan club was back in action. This schoolboy stuff, indefensibly tasteless, should have gotten old, but it never did. I suppose it was just our way of battling the monotony of a life in a small town. Go. Neil and I were on the yearbook staff, and one of our running gags was to slip Dahmer into group photos, groups to which the class freak obviously did not belong. Hey, ready? Hey, click. You got the Canon camera. And back in the day, you only took so many photos, and so they have Dahmer and the student council. And then this is really classic. I love this. This is one of my favorite ones in the whole book, is they're sitting around a campfire and they're, of course, drinking beer. This is something that I can say, like in rural Nebraska or rural Ohio, this stuff went on all the time in the 70s. So they're sitting around a campfire. You see the 78, it's Revere High School. There's a couple coolers. They all have beer cans and they're standing around the campfire, and someone says, this is to Derf. Brew? That's okay. We don't drink. Snort. Band nerds. So what we got to do is get Dahmer to put on like a command performance. Yeah, we could get even everyone to chip in a couple bucks and pay him to do his thing at the Summit Mall. This is awesome. I'm sure Jeff would totally be into this. Okay, let's start collecting the money and pick a convenient Saturday. Ha. Hey, O'Neill, Saunders, come here. So what they decided to do is, like, Dahmer would make really weird, strange noises and things that he said was what the interior designer would do. And kind of like someone who had cerebral palsy, or he would just make weird noises. And they just thought it was funny. And high school boys are like that. They just think the goofiest stuff is funny. And so in the next couple pages is where they're talking to Dahmer and asking if he'll do this while they're at the mall, you know, to just draw attention to it and to give him a laugh, of course. How much? We got $35. The Dahmer fan club voted to do it this Saturday. Agreed. Bah. And he's got his hand like this. God, that guy reeks of booze. And he looks up at the clock at 7:45 in the morning. Jeez. And so then you get a little hint about one of the things that Derf Backderf notices about Dahmer is that he started drinking. And I won't give it away because there's a particular moment in his life that causes Jeffrey Dahmer to start drinking heavily. And I won't give that away, but it just so you know that the drinking was one of the things that the kids noticed. And one of the things later in the book that Derf notices is that there's something that Dahmer does in drinking that happens very, very quickly, that he's just terrified by that fact that he was able to do that. And so here you have Derf, who's already noticing some trends with Dahmer that are very, you know, concerning. And so I think more than anything, I feel like he wrote this because he felt like, you know, he was my acquaintance. And everybody, just, everything was so negative about him. And, Dahmer himself said, I had I was like had a normal high school. I had, some acquaintances. But yeah, it was at this time that he was also discovering his sexuality, and some of his sexual desires were very perverted. And that's what kind of led to his situation of of murdering. They were all males, and so and that that piece comes out. I don't know if Derf knew that, but I think maybe he may have gotten that information from the FBI, interviews that they did with Dahmer. But I don't think that those boys, that were his acquaintances at the time, understood that about him. So I'm assuming that Beckdorf got that information from the FBI files that he was able to glean as he was writing this story, because Dahmer died in, I think, 1996. And that was one of the things I think that, it was after his murder in prison that he decided to write this book. So finally, I will say, I think you could teach this in school. I don't know that you don't really want to go into all the details of what he did, but as a means for, high school teachers to know that, if you see a student who's struggling or is, drinking excessively, that you should probably speak up, that there's something that they're dealing with. And sometimes it's really well hidden. It's not a very big school, but it just seemed like nobody cared. They just kind of let him mind it their own business about drinking. And so this was like, that's the very beginning of something that escalated. And nobody had any idea. Nobody had any idea what was going on in his mind and how sick and twisted his mind had already become and how much he needed help. So in that regard, I'd say yes, definitely you could do it as a book club. But I think you'd probably have parents who would say, oh, I don't know. It's just like, but it's not really, it doesn't really go into anything too detailed. It's pretty tame in that regard. So I think you could do it as a book club or novel panel. I was fascinated by it. I mean, I don't like those kind of stories, like true crime or any of that, but I was fascinated by the take that he took on this, on, the responsibility of adults. And I find that I really appreciated that he did that and was willing to do that. So I do know it's a series. I haven't watched the series. I've just read the book. So I do recommend it, for you as an adult reader. And I think most high school students could read this, and they would really get a lot out of it. So that's it. Until next time. Thank you for joining me. Bye.